of these. I've been mostly hanging out with the character generation stuff. Um, I actually intend to put like 3 of these up today, and I really should have cleaned my note page out instead. This video in particular is going to be talking about taking the big chair. So often we will see a bunch of people that'll be like, "Oh, me and a bunch of friends want to, we want to play Shadowrun, but we don't know what we're doing, and can somebody GM for us?" It's with the way tabletop RPGing has been going on the internet. It's like, oh, there's got to be somebody out there that can do it, and far too often I want to say that doesn't usually work out. Mostly because your friends and your interpersonal dynamic may not mesh with the other person. Another chance is most of the times GMs who wish to run games, I can easily find whatever players they want because they are the limited resource in this capacity. So the intention here in this video is going to be just take the big chair. Just do it. So many people get so little different things that are maybe fear or trepidation or just preferring to be players. But if everybody sits around and is like, oh, I don't want to be the GM, I want to play, nobody's going to get to play. So some of it is taking that sacrifice on yourself, and the fact that Shadowrun as a whole actually works out really well for a rotating GM type thing. Given as everybody is hired on for, I need you to come do this mission. Then you go do this mission. It's not like you have to worry about being halfway through a dungeon and then switching dungeon masters and all of a sudden things go horribly awry. The inclusion of cell phones and super smartphones as a setting standard means that when people don't make it or you need to add somebody in later, it can be something as simple as calling them. Super easy. Even if somebody just wants to try the game out for once and see how it goes, but then really things like our Mr. Johnson this week brought in a new player, a new runner who they want to give a tryout to. Not sure where they're going to place them yet, but they want to give them a trial. And as you have worked for him before, he's looking for your on-the-job opinion. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of mesh that stuff around. So we're going to go real quick. What do you need? Core rulebook. That's it. Ideally, you would have 2 or 3 of these for everybody. Just so if it's a physical game, you can pass it around pretty easily. The PDFs, if you're doing an online game, everybody can get their own PDF. It makes things a bit easier. As I hit the wrong button. The Control F in the PDF makes finding things nicer. However, 5th edition is unfortunately not exactly the most organized or well put together book. So that's, you get kind of used to it, and that will become a bit more of a practice makes perfect kind of thing than a easy to find thing. But with everybody having the book, there's a huge amount of not even just straight up rules information, but a huge amount of lore and fluff and flavor to it as well, which is, having recently gotten into a 5th edition D&D game, is something I slightly missed from that book. They make mention in that to other Forgotten Realms and Greyhawk and other things along those lines, which is cool to see them bring that, but nothing to the way that Shadowrun does it, where you'll have straight up little 4 or 5 page stories talking about a runner going through their daily lives, or a runner doing a run, or how something went wrong. And it kind of helps to reinforce the setting a little bit. Some knowledge of the setting is also really helpful. There is a podcast that I will link down below in the comment section called the Neo-Anarchist Podcast. Opti does a huge in-character historic retelling of basically everything from today, and actually from about 4 years ago when the Awakening started, to just about current is where he's at now. Um, Talks about the major events, lets you shape the timeline from the perspective of somebody who is an in character in world historian. It's pretty cool. The the book has a bit of that fluff to give you some of the setting. Um, Opti book fluff. The Shadowrun Returns games. Usually you can find them popping up on Steam pretty cheap, like $3 or $4 American. Um, they're, if memory serves, like 20 some years from current, and you can still get kind of that, uh, kind of get the feel for how the world is. Stuff has advanced, and the mechanics aren't quite the same, but it still has that dystopian, cyberpunk, everything in neon and dirty feel to it that is kind of what Shadowrun is for a lot of the parts. There's a couple of movies which I'm not going to go in and list, but things just real quick and real recent. The Ocean's movies, how they are planning out those crazy heists, and then the way that they are played out is could very easily have been a Shadowrun. The Smoking Aces, which is another sort of recent movie, could have very easily been a more Pink Mohawk type Shadowrun game. Um, I'm going to try and find one of the lists of movies that they talk about on like the Shadowrun subreddit and stuff, and I'll try and put a link to that down below so you can see some of the other movies that maybe if you guys are wanting to get in the mood, Johnny Mnemonic, Blade Runner are classics, um, that kind of stuff, so that you can, hey guys, this is the kind of world we're sort of getting into. Sit down and stuff. Um, Leverage, A-Team. What the hell was the other one I usually list? I go to my notes. I took notes this time, guys. It's super scary. Uh, Leverage, A-Team, X-Files, they can all be source material, if not the same kind of theme of this week we're doing this kind of crazy job and that kind of stuff. And Shadowrun is set in a lot of things about its lore, but there are so many places in the world that you could set these games in. Seattle, Hong Kong, Berlin are like pretty big. There's a huge thing with the Amazonian Aztec War that had a whole book that a lot of people might not like, but does exist out. And then the fourth edition books still have some very relevant lore in them. Vice is a great one for anything that is organized crime related, gangs and mafia and all of that stuff. The Paranormal Creatures of North America, or the Parazoology book, has a huge listing of all kinds of different things that is cool to see, like our lore nowadays. Like I'm just gonna Google real quick. Shadowrun. The things that we see as kind of being harpies or mermaids or a couple of other those ancient folklore things, like they have a Shadowrun alternative that is not Ariel, that is not a pretty little mermaid. Um, Awakened buzzards, there's basically awakened versions of anything. You imagine, I think juggernauts are like 30 feet tall or something crazy. Um, all of that stuff is there, so you can, instead of running your crazy black trenchcoat game in Seattle where most of the source material is, you could go straight to the outback of Australia and run a super Mad Max game and go completely crazy. Um, Moving on to my next little thing is there's so many rules. So what? Ignore them. Things like light modifiers for shooting penalties, I never worry about. The distance modifiers, if it's thematically appropriate and increases the tension of a scene, sure, I'm going to take a couple of dice away from you because it's like, all right, The dude is running down the alleyway in the dark, the lights are flickering above you. The wet slaps of his feet against the pavement in the Seattle rain is helping him escape. You line up your shot. -3 for light, -2 for distance, we'll say, if you have a pistol, and -1 just because it's raining, because it's Seattle. Go ahead and make your shot. You've set that up. That dude is trying to get away. Most of the times, who cares? All you're going to do is slow down your game, and that's not exactly what people are wanting to look up rules all the time. Um, Shadowrun does have the rules there for you if you want. There is treading water and memory tests for players for NPCs to remember your characters, uh, and their interactions with them. There are crazy rules about anything involving the Matrix. Actually, is a giant mess, unfortunately. Um, if you're starting out in that situation, I recommend using the tried and true NPC Decker contact that usually works out just to kind of do that stuff behind the scenes because it can be a little rough to get into. Granted, it's usually also where new players love to go. It's like, oh, I want to be a techomancer and manipulate the Matrix with my mind. Well, yeah, that's cool and all, but I'll cover that in a second. Um, the rules serve for are there to serve the purpose of giving structure to your story. However, not all stories need rules. You can easily pick and choose which ones you want so long as you are consistent and so long as if you're introducing stuff you can be upfront and talk to your players about it. The um, suddenly bringing something in is not cool, but at the same time if somebody builds something and they thought something worked one way, well, give them the option to change it or change the rules you're using. Maybe they didn't realize that technomancers can't go cold sim and their character has a fear of being trapped in the matrix or something like that, so they never want to go hot sim. It's like, well, that doesn't work with the rules, but we can just change that. It's not a big deal. uh, there are certain things that you don't want to mess around too much with that, uh, but at your table nobody is going to be telling you you're having the wrong kind of fun. So long as everybody's enjoying themselves, it doesn't matter what you do. I did a giant trope based Battle of the Bands run that was based in Shadowrun and was okay with that world, but they they didn't do any criminal activities. They went down and they just became the most metal band that there ever was. It was awesome. Everybody had a good time. Did we do? Was it really a Shadowrun? Could it have been done in any system? Probably, but that's where the characters were, and that is um, where we were playing. It was fun. Um, Finding players is really kind of easy if you want. Um, there are people out there that we will see on the Shadowrun subreddit a lot and on other places that are always looking for a game, but nobody around them wants to play, and they don't have a game shop nearby them and that kind of stuff. You can go on Roll20, which is actually the backdrop I'm using for taking my notes. They have a looking for group function where you can find games to jump in and join. You can then host your own group. They also have there's a subreddit of uh, LFG and there's a Roll20 LFG um, for people that not only want to do Shadowrun but a bunch of other RPGs and such. The I gotta do it better. Wait, taking notes. Um, the main Shadowrun forums will also have a link to missions, and they will then drag you to some shops that may or may not be nearby that do Shadowrun's missions events or conventions and get you started on that. There is also the Runner Hub over on Reddit. It's a large community-based, mostly one-shot-ish games, but with persistent characters and universe. Um, for clarity's sake, I am hugely involved with them. Be more than happy to come in and get you involved. even if you are, as my headset turns off, I need to fix that. Even if you are just, all right, I've made the decision, I'm going to come and just GM for my game. I'm going to step up to that big chair and I'm going to do it. But I want a little hands-on experience first. Come on by. We'd love to have you for a couple of games, throw you on there, get you playing, or even just swing by and watch our streams that usually get posted whenever there's a run up. Um, Most people in the that do the streaming are more than happy to answer questions in the Twitch chat. Most GMs are more than happy to answer questions and that kind of stuff. I'm more than happy to answer most questions. It it's there and it is there to. The idea of the hub was to get more people playing Shadowrun. Even if you're not playing with us, we are happy that you play. And that's all that matters. So where do you start? Well, not everybody learns the same way. Um, at some time, you are going to have to at least give a brief read through the core rulebook, but that doesn't necessarily need to be where you start. I have a lot of free time at work, not free time, I should say, personal time at work. So I listen to a lot of podcasts. As such, the Arcology podcast, which once again the link will be down below in the video description, is a fantastic resource, and I love those guys a whole bunch. They literally start episode one is what is a Shadowrun, and they begin to describe the process of going to the meet, getting the Johnson, doing legwork, a small series on the different archetype dossiers and that kind of stuff. They have an actual play, which is always fun to listen to, where you'll be able to follow their characters over the past year or so. That is still ongoing. And those of you that learn via listening or watching, however you want to put it, that resource is there for you. It's great. There's a couple of other podcasts. Critical Lich is one. Link will be down below. Gamers Tavern. Link will be down below. And anything else that I find in there that is Shadowrun related, Dice Crimes actually is one of the newer ones that I have begun listening to. I'll throw a link for them down below, assuming I don't forget. It gives you more of a option for how you wish to consume your Shadowrun, and there's a saying that good artists create, great artists steal. Just borrow their stuff. Uh, I've been known to borrow inspiration for things from other places. The second place you can start is on the Shadowrun subreddit or on the main forums. People there are always open to answer rules questions, give ideas, that kind of stuff. I am not going to get into a lot of rules heavy discussion on my channel. There is a couple of other channels out there, I believe. One is Complex Action, which I will link to. And there was another one that I saw recently. I don't remember what it was, but if I find it, I'll stick it down in there. I'm going to talk more on my channel about themes and processes. I don't think that's quite right. Less mechanics, more story-ish stuff. I have a series here with character generation storytelling, where the idea is to create a character sheet that, at a glance, when you have finished reading the character sheet, you will have a really good idea of who that character is, because Shadowrun has a great character generation system that really allows you to apply that kind of stuff. Looking through the D&D 5th edition that I've recently gotten into, characters up until about level 3 are almost exactly the same as every other character of that class. And yeah, they may have slightly different attributes, or one might have slightly more hit points because his constitution score is higher. But a fighter is a fighter, and a barbarian is a barbarian. They're probably all going to have the same stuff. If you want to get more complicated with it, you could totally do the where you buy your gear instead of using the free packs you get. The spellcasters will have different spells, but that's whatever. Shadowrun isn't like that at all. You have a huge wealth of things. Yeah, you'll have your active skills, which is like your proficiencies or other class-specific stuff that you have in D&D, but the addition of knowledge skills is a little bit more into who your character is. Like I could have a street samurai that is kitted out with automatics and heavy weapons and sneaking and perception dice, but maybe I take two of those skill dice and I give him artisan with the cooking specialization, and then in his knowledge skills, I'll give him uh, like baking as a knowledge skill. Maybe only like 2 points. That's two active skills I've used and two knowledge skills I've used. But all of a sudden, I have a guy who has a little more flavor to him. Maybe throw on top of that he has a dependence quality of a small child, and now you have this brief view of this guy that has all of these skills that are dedicated to shooting things, in addition to his little cooking skills and his little baking knowledge, and he has a child from his dependents. So that paints maybe a picture of him doing a little stay-at-home dad stuff and sending little Susie off to school with packed lunches. That's the kind of stuff I'm looking to kind of portray on my channel. Stuff like this where I'm going to try and encourage people into GMing and that kind of stuff. And the other main thing I want to do is I want to sit down and I'm going to design runs and I'm going to post up the notes for them. And I'm going to post up a video about the notes as I talk through the things to it. And then I want you guys to take those and literally run with them. You people have trouble, like, I don't really know how to build a run. Let me do it for you. Let's get you playing. And then after a couple of times, you'll be able to do it on your own. Um, as I have waxed lyrical about myself for a little while, I'm going to move on. There is a number of actual plays in addition to the podcast that I mentioned that have some. You can find others are always cropping up on your podcast preference of choice. There you can find a couple on YouTube that you can watch and get ideas from. Uh, and then just I have a couple of other links that I will drop down below. One is 101 scenarios from Shadowrun 4th edition, which are little 2 paragraph things that give you a brief overview of who's the Johnson, what's the job idea, and that kind of stuff, and you can extrapolate from there. I have a link to a random run generator, which I will also put down below, and you guys can go crazy with that. Uh, Hopefully that'll get you started. If you have questions, comment section, hit me up on Reddit at /u/Bamce, BAMCE. I'll be happy to do what I can to help. Party balance is the kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about, that Shadowrun does not have a party balance. The semi-standard Holy Trinity, we'll say, is fighter, mage, cleric, or DPS, magic, healing. Shadowrun doesn't need any of that. You can literally have a team of 4 street sams, 3 mages, and however you want to have that mixed up. A Johnson that is hiring a team will know some of the habits, capabilities, and preferred methods of that team. He's not going to hire a team with no matrix support for a run that does I'm sorry, got distracted by Twitch chat. I should really learn to do some video editing so that I could fix that, but sorry. Um, a Johnson is going to know the team that he is hiring, and as such, he wants to get his job done, so he's not going to hire a team to do a run that he doesn't uh, that he doesn't think that they're going to be able to finish. So if he's expecting high magical aspects to be in the opposition, he's not going to bring in a team with no mage. He's not going to get a team full of uncouth ganger street toughs to go infiltrate a high society party. Granted, these are things that you can do, and they are totally viable run options. You can see, as you get into it, you'll begin to see Shadowrun in every aspect of your everyday life. You can see it all over the place. The one-ofs or the off-brand things like the high society party or when you don't have magical support, you can bring in an NPC. It works best if you are needing a matrix heavy situation and you could bring in a matrix guy because they don't actually have to physically be there, but you can just kind of like hand waves like, all right, he's going to have 12 dice in deckering. And when you guys ask, hey, can you search this? Ask that player to roll those 12 dice. And it'll be as though he got that many hits and do it from there. One of the other things that kind of comes up um, is opposition. Depending upon the team and how you're built, you're going to want to kind of scale your opposition. I prefer a scale of 12 plus or minus 4 for whatever they're good at. If it's Joe Wage Slave sitting at a desk, not really paying attention to what's going on, I'm going to start with that 12 and I'm going to give him -4 because he's a nobody. That is your effective 3 in a attribute, 3 in a skill, and then maybe some incidental modifiers. Maybe Steve in accounting is a little more observant, so his perception is 4. Or maybe he has good hearing, so his recently acquired corporate sponsored cyber ears that he has give him +2 to that. Little things like that easily bring you up to a brings him up to an 8 dice pool for hearing the Shadowrunners skulking around in the hallways. Meanwhile, the security guy, well, he probably has a little bit better. He's been trained to deal with a little bit more rough and tumble crowd. Maybe the occasional Shadowrunner, maybe just to look good so that they could be more consistent and shoot the hit the targets on the range. So he might have a 4 agility, a 4 in his pistols, and maybe a specialization in semi-automatics because that is the only thing that he's really had training with. Like he is really familiar with it, so that gives him a dice pool of 10. Meanwhile, we come up to the captain or lieutenant or whoever is the head of security. He's been doing this for years. He is significantly more experienced, or maybe he got injured and has actually had some augmentations to fix that. He all of a sudden has a agility of 4, a dice pool or a skill of 4, 2 points of muscle augmentation to bring him to a 10, and then maybe a smartling. So now all of a sudden he's throwing 12 dice. Um, what I'm trying to demonstrate here is it doesn't matter how you get to those dice pools. You don't need to sit down and build out character sheets for all of your opposition. Just some general numbers and go with. Uh, on a similar note, just around that, I usually go around with a 7 to 9 ish on my dodge pool to avoid being shot, and usually 15 to 20 on my soak pool, plus or minus meta type variations, because obviously trolls are going to be tougher. Uh, and orcs, that's the other one. Totally forgot. Um, you don't need to get super in depth. I have a random name generator, which I will also link down below as a resource that's great. It's a little scary, the stuff that this random name generator is going to put out there. It'll do things like phone numbers, birthdays, age, even give them a fake email address, some websites, a fake credit card number, uh, physical characteristics, all kinds of stuff. It's all randomly generated, but the idea that maybe one day that random number generation is going to hit my numbers is kind of scary. You can just pre-generate a couple of these names and details and have them on some index cards that you can just whip out real quick to crap, I need this to be a person. Boom, here we go. Or if you're doing online, you can just hit the generate button. Boom, there you go. Um, Stuff gets a little bit more complicated when you get into non-human opposition, dealing with the Matrix hosts, spiders, spirits, paracritters, that kind of stuff. There is a little bit of that in the main book. Some of the Shadowrun 4th edition stuff is still super relevant, hasn't been updated, unfortunately, like the paracritters book or uh, some of the foreign country where they'll have more of the exotic stuff. It hasn't been updated for 5th edition yet. But if you come across the fourth edition versions of those books, they are still fairly on point. Or you can just make up stuff. Like I say I want to build a canine of some kind. I'm just going to go into the main book, use that use that basic stat line, and maybe push one attribute up over the other. Maybe find one of the critter powers that is listed in the core book, or Street Grimoire has a whole bunch of them, and I believe Run Faster also has a fairly good amount. Throw that critter power on there, and all of a sudden it's a bit different, and work with it that way. It doesn't need to necessarily be super in depth history wise on what this creature is. New things are being discovered all the time in Shadowrun as the mana levels continue to rise. The last other thing I want to talk about with them is equip. A lot of the time, your players are going to be better equipped and such than their opposition. That's not 100% true in Shadowrun. The average person is going to have a smartphone. They're going to have some way of manipulating that smartphone with their mind, be it a set of trodes or a data jack or something along those lines. Maybe they're even a horrible techomancer. So your desk guard that is being shot at, he's going to do what anybody else is going to do. He's going to hit that panic button. And most times in Shadowrun, that's not a physical button. It's an augmented reality button that he can hit with his comlink, just as a oh crap. Um, Other things like the world itself is going to be a big part of the opposition because at default, a Shadowrunner is a criminal. At absolute best, he is paid to do criminal things. At worst, he's a straight up terrorist. He will be hired to blow up buildings and do horrible things to people that don't deserve horrible things done to them. So the world on a whole is not going to react normally. I'm sorry, not going to react kindly to the troll driving around in polite society with a huge combat axe strapped to his back. Unlike in D&D and fantasy, walking around full plate mail isn't that big of a deal. Your adventures and that kind of stuff. Um, most of my thoughts on that are covered in my Leaving Fantasy Behind video, which is a bit longer and more specific about that kind of thing. I don't really think I have a lot else on the like taking that big chair. You don't necessarily need to worry about play. It's like not getting the opportunity to play. The role play will be what you make of it. You have every Shadowrunner has contacts, people they know, people they interact with on this sort of regular. Sit down with your player, discuss who that contact is. You can come up with a little bit of information about them. Maybe you can even come up behind air quotes behind that character's back as to some of the motivations and reasonings that contact does certain things. That'll take a little bit of player trust, which is something I should talk about. You're adults. Talk to your players as adults. Set some boundaries. Not necessarily your boundaries, but also set their boundaries and things that they don't want to get into. Also, don't be afraid to be like, I don't know, guys. Give me a minute. If the players come at you with something completely sideways, be like, be honest, I got nothing. Hold on. And then just take a quiet minute to let it percolate in your head, and hopefully you'll be able to come out with a reasonable alternative or ending to what is going on. One of the other books that I'm going to link down below is the Dungeon World Dungeon book, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and that is fantastic no matter what system you're looking to play. I cannot recommend it enough. It is a fun and loose system that will really actually help your GMing methods and your organizational methods and give you ideas on how to keep things rolling. One of these times I'm going to do a game of that as a one shot on my channel because even though I'm apparently making a very Shadowrun oriented channel, it is still relevant and useful to those things. I believe that is where I'm at for this particular video. I want to thank you guys for coming by and listening. Uh, that YouTube thing where you leave comments, I'm not going to stress that right now because this isn't my live like some other YouTubers. I just want more people to enjoy the game on a whole. And please, if you have questions, leave them down below, and I will come back and get to them as soon as I can. Thank you all for listening.